Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. Today we are going to be talking about a gun we've talked about before, the CZ52. And we are doing so courtesy of a couple of very generous supporters of the channel. John, who sent me this gun for the channel. Thank you. It's a nice gun. And Andrew, who volunteered the loan of his own gun and considerable ammunition and accessories because it was interesting. Now, I do have future plans for this gun. I really want to shoot an action shooting international match with it because I think that would be a hoot. This gun, of course, will be going back to Andrew. So, anyway, speaking of support for the channel, if you want to support the channel, you can contribute to my efforts via Patreon. There's a link in the description below. It's very much appreciated and it very much helps. So, to move on, we'll do a quick recap. In the early 1950s, Czechoslovakia wanted a new service pistol. And they made a prototype, which was a 9x19 millimeter with a single double action trigger and other modernish sort of things. And of course, they were now in the Eastern Bloc, so the Soviet Union said, no, you must make it in 7.62 Tokarev, which is quite a long cartridge, and so the Czechs had to modify their original prototype design to accommodate the very much longer cartridge, which meant they lost the magazine release in the conventional location at the trigger guard. There was no room for it. They lost, so they had to go to the heel release magazine, and it had to become double action, single action only because whatever double action mechanism they were using was not adaptable when there was significantly less room for it. So the gun was sort of compromised from the start. Now, in the previous video, I said this was an excellent service handgun. I need to amend that. It's an excellent design for a service handgun of its period. In practice, they were less excellent because under the Soviet bloc, in post-war austerity, etc., they used cast firing pins, which broke frequently, and the crucial rollers that lock the mechanism were often not heat-treated correctly, which led to all manner of problems, which all amounted to the same thing: gun no work. So, but they did serve for 30 years, and then they were exported to the United States because if a gun is cheap enough, we'll buy it. I got my first one, I think, in 91 or 92, and I think I paid the princely sum of like $85 for it. So they were quite cheap when they first came in, and in the way of such things, values went up over the years after that when there were no more. Now, there were only 200,000 of these produced between 52 and 54, and there were never another production run. So that's all there is, and I am moderately sure that most of those guns made it to the United States as surplus. Enough made it to the United States as surplus to actually spawn an aftermarket to support the guns. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. And best done probably on the tabletop, so let's get to that. Okay, now the guns, as they come, are chambered in 7.62 Tokarev, which is a potent cartridge. This particular brand of random Eastern European ammo gets an average velocity of 1,530 feet per second with an 85 grain bullet for 445 foot-pounds of energy. But military ammunition is sometimes loaded up to 550 foot-pounds of energy. And so the mechanism, being a roller-locked breech, adapts to that quite well if your rollers are heat-treated properly. And some were and some weren't. So, but the gun was designed for 9mm, which is much, much more common. So importers often had barrels reamed out for 9mm, like this one here, which, as you can see, has had very little use. And here's the roller lock breech mechanism. When the gun recoils, the rollers are able to move in, and the slide can proceed to the rear as expected. This one actually has part of that odd aftermarket we were discussing with a threaded section, which appears to have a place for a set screw, which kind of implies that this was intended to be used with some sort of compensator or barrel weight, which is kind of an interesting thought. But that wasn't satisfactory for everyone, so someone, somewhere, at some time, manufactured a barrel in 9mm Largo, which, despite being much longer than 9mm, works just fine, and it's about the same power as 9mm. And as you saw from the shooting section, the gun worked with no more than a barrel swap. Didn't change any springs or nothing. It worked quite well in 7.62, 9mm Largo, and 9mm Parabellum, which is kind of interesting, and I think largely may be attributed to that roller-locked breech. Now, another thing that came up in the aftermarket, you can see the regular grips are black or dark brown Bakelite, or maybe it's black Bakelite that is oxidized to dark brown, because it can do that. And wooden grips were available, and I'm told are still available. And they're somewhat handsome. These have a cutout at the top for a extended slide release, which we were not able to find to mount for this purpose. And as you can see, this gun has an extended slide release, extended outward significantly. But that makes it much easier to both lock the slide back and drop the slide. And it's kind of an interesting piece because, one, because it sticks out so far, and two, because it's secured by a nut and an Allen head screw and a bolt, or a nut rather, on the other side. Why? I don't know. But it is. So several types, obviously, of aftermarket slide stop and extended slide stop are available, as were the wooden grips, which I think Hogue still makes wooden grips for this, which is kind of interesting. So this is an interesting thing we often find with cheap surplus guns. They're cheap, so why not mess with them? And people did. And the results are interesting. I find that this slide stop I have a very large hand. I still can't easily hit it without shifting my grip. And it sticks out an awful long way. I don't know, maybe it was a competition modification and they intended to put a compensated 9mm barrel in it. Who knows? But it is interesting. And given that there were 200,000 of these and they were all pretty much imported at the same time, it's kind of interesting that an aftermarket sprang up to the extent that it would produce multiple variants of accessories. Unfortunately, they didn't upgrade the sights. Well, and here's another thing. So the standard magazine has just a utilitarian flat base plate, but somebody saw fit to make brass base plates with a finger extension, which appears to have the magazine drilled through and have it somehow pinned in place, which, you have to secure it somehow. But I have to admit, for someone with large hands like mine, it's kind of nice. Kind of wish I could still get them, only maybe in, like, I don't know, aluminum or black steel or something, and preferably not needing to drill through the magazine to mount them. Magazine capacity is, of course, unchanged. And the standard magazine, by the way, takes down in the standard manner, which is a lot more convenient. And a little bit more about the gun itself. The ergonomics are unusual. Notably, this big hump back here, which puts the bore axis quite high over the hand and seems strangely shaped. But in practice, it actually works surprisingly well. And while there is a tendency with the high bore axis for the muzzle to flip more, I have found that in practice, it's not such a big deal with this gun, possibly owing to the light bullets, and possibly owing something to that roller-locked breech. I know HK's roller-delayed breeches do soften the apparent recoil impulse of their pistols that have it, and then maybe it's doing the same thing here. So Andrew also included some accessories, other than the mechanical ones shown already, with this gun, including an original holster, which has a pouch for a spare magazine and a place for a cleaning rod, neither of which are present in this example, but I think they may be among the stuff he loaned me. This is interesting because this is much stouter leather than the one shown in the previous video, and it has been further, I'm going to go with enhanced, by weatherproofing it with latex paint. It works. Very weird. Now, far more interesting to me is this shoulder harness, which is very clearly made specifically for a CZ52, and in fact has CZ52 written right on the back, in addition to being marked Falco, made in Slovakia, which is interesting. And there is a magazine pouch on the off side, and this does not appear to be particularly old and appears to be completely unused. I'm not sure what circumstances would have prompted a Slovakian company to produce a shoulder holster for this gun, but yet here it is. And it's apparently came with the gun. Oh, and in the way of many service type shoulder holsters from Europe that I've seen, this also has belt slides, so the holster can be dismounted for use as a high-rise belt holster. The camera's tilting because we're having technical issues. So, anyway, the place that I see this most is on holsters that were made for police agencies for carrying the weapon undercover. I've really got to do something better about mounting this camera. And it's possible that that's what this is, although there are no agency markings or anything of the sort on it. So I don't know. And this appears to be set up so that it can be worn for horizontal carry under the arm or vertical carry under the arm. So it's quite adaptable and interesting, and it's quite well made, good quality leather. We should not allow their military holsters to influence our opinion of Slovakian holster makers, obviously. But that's just kind of an interesting footnote. And I'm sure this has never been used because why would you? CZ52 is a neat piece of Cold War history and good conversation piece because of its novel system of operation. You can purchase replacement rollers that are properly heat treated and a billet firing pin that is also properly heat treated. And I would definitely recommend replacing the firing pin if you get one of these, if it hasn't been already, which actually I've found fairly often they have been, because those cast ones were really bad. It's commendably light for a Cold War service pistol, full-size all-steel service pistol, and this is fully the size of a 1911, but it only weighs 33 ounces. Now, of course, in modern terms, that's quite heavy for a single-stack semi-auto, but for a service pistol at the time, it's actually pretty good. And they are pleasant to shoot. With some surplus ammo, the muzzle blast can be rather disconcerting. But this gun was uniformly pleasant to shoot in all three calibers, 7.62, 9mm Largo, and 9mm Parabellum, and I really couldn't tell any difference between them from recoil. They all hit the same point of impact. Something to do with the way the barrels have to be fitted, I presume. And they all did shoot the same point of impact, which was slightly low at 7 yards. If you like this video, and I suspect if you're still watching you did, would it kill you to hit the like button? Seriously? It really helps the channel and helps the videos get broader distribution and all that stuff. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. So anyway, I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you again real soon.